With the Apple Watch Ultra that came out last year, Apple first introduced a watch specifically designed for outdoor athletes. Higher quality materials, some special outdoor features, but above all a significantly better battery life than the normal Apple Watches. And although the watch was definitely the most suitable Apple Watch for athletes, it still couldn't compete with watches from Garmin, Coros, Suunto or Polar in some aspects. So this year there's a new attempt, because as always Apple stick to its annual rhythm and already introduced the Ultra 2 1 year after the first version of the Ultra. But is it a better sports watch now, and can it even keep up with the Garmin, Polar, Suunto or Coros watches? As always, I put the watch through its paces, and in this video we will discuss all the pros and the cons, so that you know whether it's a good choice for you. So let's get started. Before we really dive deeper into this video, you might probably want to know that this year is the 9th anniversary of the Apple Watch. Accordingly, the Apple Watch Series 9 was introduced. And there are some rumors that for next year, for the 10th anniversary, Apple might plan some major updates to the watch. In the case of the iPhone, for example, a thoroughly major update and above all a new design came out with the iPhone X. Similarly, Apple could come up with some really significant changes or a completely revised design with the next year's Apple Watch, which would be the Apple Watch Series 10 or Apple Watch X, and it might also affect the third generation of the Apple Watch Ultra. Of course, this is all speculation for now, but for this year, not much has changed in comparison to last year. Let's start with the looks, for example, and in this regard it's absolutely impossible to distinguish the Ultra 2 from the last year's Ultra. The watch still has a 49mm case which is made of titanium, and it comes with the particularly scratch-resistant sapphire glass. By the way, this is also one of the aspects that sets this watch apart from the normal Series 9, which is made of aluminum or stainless steel and does not use sapphire glass. The Apple Watch Ultra 2 is therefore still super high quality and robust. For example, it's also waterproof up to 100 meters, but it's also comparatively heavy. The case alone weighs 62 grams, and with the tray loop strap, which I opted for, it brings it to 71 grams. So the watch is quite big and heavy, especially for smaller wrists. The Garmin Fenix 7 X Pro, for example, which many people already classify as clearly too big, is only half a millimeter thicker than the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with a thickness of 14.9 millimeters, and overall the dimensions are very similar. And we're talking about the largest version of the Fenix 7 Pro here. It also comes in two other smaller versions. But you don't have that choice with the Apple Watch Ultra 2, this watch only comes in one size. And speaking of straps, there is still the Alpine loop for outdoor adventures, the tray loop for endurance athletes, and the ocean loop, which is supposed to be for extreme water sports and scuba diving. Unlike last year where I chose the Alpine loop, I opted for the tray loop this time, and this one is really lightweight, fits well on the wrist and generally makes for a comfortable wear. Other than that, we still have this crown with its protective case on the outside here. The watch has the same shape and all microphones, sensors, buttons, speakers and the action button are in the exact same places. Funnily enough, it even says Watch Ultra on the back and not Watch Ultra 2, so there's really no chance to distinguish the watch from its predecessor, at least from the outside. But instead, Apple promises that the Apple Watch is now the company's first carbon-neutral product and thus a first milestone towards Apple's plan to be completely carbon-neutral by 2030. We can certainly talk for hours about how the company tries to do so, to what extent this is just greenwashing or simply intended to make the manufacturer attractive to even more customers. But honestly, I'm not an expert in this field. I think it's just worth mentioning that Apple is doing something in this direction at all. As just mentioned, the Apple Watch Ultra 2 cannot be distinguished from its predecessor on the outside. However, of course, the watch is not completely identical to the Ultra 1, so some things have changed. Firstly, there is the display. This is of course still an OLED display, which is extremely bright and colorful. The displays of the Apple Watches in general have always been state of the art and pretty much the best on the market. But that has apparently not been enough for the manufacturer, because now the display is even better, because above all it is even brighter. With up to 3000 nits, the display of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is now 50% brighter than its predecessor, which had 2000 nits. Well, at least in theory. To be honest, I have to say that the difference between 2000 and 3000 nits is not really noticeable. Now, I don't currently have the Apple Watch Ultra 1 from last year here anymore, but I wore it for several months and I can still remember it pretty good. And really, I never ever thought that this watch is not bright enough. The Apple Watch Ultra 1 was already super bright, and to be honest, I don't see the Apple Watch Ultra 2 to be 50% brighter. However, I definitely see the difference between 1000 nits and 2000 nits, because 1000 nits is what the Garmin Epix Pro offers, for example. This watch also has an OLED display, but is much less bright than the Apple Watch Ultra 2. The difference to its predecessor can only be seen under direct sunlight, where the watch really is super easy to read, especially for a watch with an OLED display, or even more so when you activate the flashlight. Unlike the Fenix 7 Pro, for example, the Ultra 2 does not have a built-in flashlight in the form of LED lights on the case, but instead it uses the 3000 nits of the display to simply brighten up. This flashlight is a bit brighter than that of the Ultra, so the additional 1000 nits are noticeable in this case. In the other direction, the watch can now also turn darker down to 1 nit, previously it was 2 nits. This is especially useful when using the watch at night. And of course there is a night mode again, where everything is only displayed in red and black. So yes, the display is a bit brighter, which is certainly noticeable in some situations, but it's also kind of an innovation that no one really asked for. So if you were to ask Apple Watch Ultra 1 users what improvements they would wish, I'm pretty sure that no one would say that the watch should become a bit brighter. And the same applies for the new big innovation, which is the new chip. Because this watch uses the new S9 chip, a new dual-core CPU with 5.6 billion transistors, which is 60% more than the previous generation, which Apple claims to be twice as fast with some tasks. Again, it certainly all sounds good, but the difference is not really noticeable from my point of view. And here we can say the same as before. If you were to ask Apple Watch Ultra 1 users, I'm pretty sure no one would complain about the watch being too slow. Because just like other Apple Watches, it is one of the fastest on the market. If you would compare the Ultra and Ultra 2 side by side, you would probably notice that the Ultra 2 opens apps a few milliseconds faster, but if you use them one after the other, you wouldn't know which watch comes with the new super fast chip and which one uses the S8 chip from last year. So again, this is an innovation that will probably open some more doors in the future, but for now it's an improvement that no one really asked for. However, the new chip also allows for some additional features. First, we now have on-device Siri. We know Siri, of course, which is Apple's voice assistant, but to use it on the Apple Watch we need a paired iPhone and an internet connection. However, this internet connection is now no longer necessary to use Siri, at least for some requests. For example, you can now command Siri to set a timer or alarm clock without an internet connection. But at the moment you can't really do much more with it. However, Apple has announced that there will be an update in the future, probably towards the end of the year, in which Siri and Apple Health will work together, so that you can ask about health-related data such as your steps or heart rate without an internet connection. Like I said, this is not here yet. It will come with an update, hopefully at the end of the year, and it will be exclusive to the S9 chipset, so exclusive to the Series 9. It won't come to previous Apple Watches. Another innovation that is only possible with the new chip is double tap. There were already hand gestures before, which also worked, but honestly not quite as reliably, but now there is a new double tap feature. So you can double tap your index finger on your thumb, by the way it works for your other fingers as well, and then you can, for example, jump between widgets, stop or start music or answer calls. And for me that works really well and reliably now. And a third innovation that the new chip enables is the iPhone precision finding. Because you could already play a ringtone on your iPhone via the Apple Watch, but now you can see exactly how far away you are from the phone and in which direction you need to move. However, that only works in combination with the latest iPhone, the iPhone 15. I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, which I don't really consider old, but apparently it's too old to use this feature. This video is mainly about the question to what extent the new Apple Watch Ultra 2 is suitable as a sports watch. The first version of the Ultra has already made a huge progress due to the watchOS update at that time. I won't go into detail here about every feature that we already know from last year's Ultra, but let's quickly talk about the highlights. The Apple Watch Ultra 2 once again offers a variety of different training modes, including a multi-sport mode for all triathletes and, for example, a special dive computer app. But especially for runners, the Apple Watch took a giant leap forward last year. For the first time, the watch could not only measure classic data such as distance or speed, but also things like stride length, vertical movement and ground contact time. It could also track the running power directly from the wrist. And these stats provide a detailed insight into your running efficiency, which makes the watch much more interesting for athletes. In addition, the watch could also calculate the heart rate zones and personalize them based on your health data. Outside the training mode, the watch can also calculate the VO2 max and many other things such as your heart rate, blood oxygen saturation levels, ECG, body temperature or sleep. For the latter, the sleep duration and, for example, the sleep phases can be determined, but there is no real feedback on all this data. And that's a decisive difference to special sports watches such as those from Garmin, Polar, Chorus and Co. With the Garmin Venue 3, for example, which was also recently introduced, you get a sleep coach that gives you tips for improving your sleep quality and general recovery. To do this, the watch tries to take into account the most important factors, so something like your age, your activities, your sleep over the past few days, naps during the day or heart rate variability. And then based on that, the watch recommends you a sleep duration for the night ahead. For example, after a very busy day or perhaps a less restful last night, this recommended sleep duration might be a bit higher. In addition, Garmin's advanced watches have widgets such as the training status, which shows you whether you are currently improving, deteriorating or maintaining your form. All these things go beyond the training mode, they analyze various data and summarize meaningful results for you. With the Apple Watch Ultra 2, you still have many measurements and data, but not such a well-founded feedback. So this is still a big difference between the Ultra 2 and proper sports watches. But as I said, the watch is making progress, and as I also said, last year it was the runners that had some nice new features and this year it's the cyclists. The watch is now compatible with cycling accessories such as power meters in particular, which means it can also determine advanced metrics such as cadence or cycling power. What's also new is that the watch's data fields can now be displayed live on a connected iPhone. So when you are out cycling, you can use your iPhone as a bike computer by displaying the Ultra 2's measured data. So you don't always have to turn your wrist or take your hands off the handlebars. However, these updates are not specific to the Ultra 2, but come with the new watchOS 10 update, which you can also download to older Apple Watches. So last year it was the running features and this year it was all about cycling. So what about next year? In my opinion, it's high time that Apple really cares about the outdoor athletes. I'm specifically thinking about hiking or mountaineering, because in this regard there is still a big gap to the watches from Garmin and Co, especially looking at the navigation features. You can navigate with the Maps app and also use a backtrack feature via the Compass app, but you cannot use any navigation features in the pre-installed training mode of the watch. Unlike many sports watches, you cannot download routes onto the watch and use them to navigate during a training session or be navigated back to the start during a training session. This is of course an absolute no-go for outdoor athletes, who the watch is supposed to be aimed at. What is new this year, however, is that you can now use topographical maps, well, at least kind of. You can download topographical maps to your iPhone and then use them on the watch for navigation. In the Maps app on the Ultra 2, you can also have topographical maps in addition to the classic maps. But as I said, that's only possible in the Maps app and not in the training mode where you would want to use it actually. And it's also only available in the US at the moment, so yeah, Apple is working on expanding the availability, but currently it's just the US. So yes, there is progress, but in very, very small steps. For the next year, for the 10th anniversary of the Apple Watch, I really hope for some bigger upgrades, especially for the outdoor sports areas. Now that we've already talked about the navigation, we can also talk about the GPS. Just like last year, the Ultra 2 has a dual frequency GPS system in which satellite signals are received on the L1 and L5 bands. Sounds complicated, but basically it's just more satellite signals at the same time, which should ultimately improve the GPS accuracy. For me personally, it has also turned out that the watch was super accurate. And this year we have the exact same GPS chip built into the Ultra 2 as we had last year built into the Ultra, so we shouldn't really expect insanely big differences. But of course I wanted to test it, and here are the results. Here you can see one of my running sessions that I tracked simultaneously with the Ultra 2 and the Fenix 7X Pro, which for me personally has been one of the most accurate watches. As we can see here, the Ultra 2 deviates very little from the route of the Fenix, accurately tracking the path without cutting any corners, for example. Then, as usual, I went into the forest and ran back and forth on narrow trails so that the recorded route should ideally consist of two nearly identical sections. And it pretty much does. This is a very accurate result, and I have definitely seen many less accurate watches doing this test. For comparison, here you can once again see the Fenix 7X Pro, which might just be slightly more accurate, but to be honest, there are no significant differences. Therefore, in terms of the GPS accuracy, the Ultra 2 can definitely compete with other sports watches. The same thing that I said about the GPS chip also applies for the heart rate sensor, because it's the exact same as last year. And according to my experience, all of the previous Apple Watches were the most accurate watches out there, even when compared to Garmin, Polar, Coros or Suunto watches. Especially in workouts that are harder to track, like strength training, they were really the only watches that you could rely on. For all of the other manufacturers, I would always recommend using a chest strap instead. So is the Ultra 2 accurate again? Here you can see one of my running sessions with the Ultra 2 data in blue and the data from a chest strap that I wore simultaneously in red. Initially, the watch took a few seconds longer to detect the increase in heart rate, but this doesn't really matter as it has no significant impact on the final results. Apart from a minor inaccuracy in the middle part, the heart rate monitoring was very accurate, with the average heart rate differing by only 1 beat per minute from the chest strap. In a second running session, it looks even better, with the average heart rate differing by only 0.2 beats per minute. This is really an excellent result. However, when it comes to strength training in the gym, things are quite different, which I find very interesting. The watch is accurate at the beginning, but then it essentially misses 3 increases in heart rate. After that, however, the measurement becomes extremely accurate. So in the second half of the workout, the Ultra 2's data very closely matches the chest strap data. In another strength training session, the pattern is similar. Accurate at the start, a less accurate middle part, and then extreme accuracy towards the end. I can't say exactly why this happened. I performed similar exercises in both workouts but in a different order, so it's probably not due to the exercises themselves. It's somewhat unfortunate that there were these inaccuracies in the middle part, because the overall results are really impressive. In summary, the watch didn't provide results as precise as my previous Apple Watches, but the Ultra 2 is still definitely more accurate than other sports watches and smartwatches. Lastly, I would like to talk about the battery life. Earlier I was talking about asking Ultra Watch 1 users what they would wish for in the Ultra Watch 2, and I'm pretty sure no one would have said that the watch should become brighter or faster, but I'm pretty sure that many people would have responded with a better battery life. And for all the people that hope for a better battery life with the Ultra 2, I have to disappoint you. Because on paper the watch lasts just as long as its predecessor. 36 hours with normal usage, 72 hours in power saving mode and up to 17 hours during workouts in power saving mode. One might think that the battery life should at least be somewhat better given that there's a more efficient chip in use. However, the display has now also become brighter and it seems that these two things roughly even out, at least if you believe Apple's claims. Now at least usually Apple tends to be a bit conservative with its battery life numbers, so usually it's a bit more than what's stated. This is what a typical day looks like for me. I started the day with the watch fully charged at 100%. After that I went for a half-hour run and to my surprise the watch still had 100% battery remaining after that. Following a 5-minute rest period I ran directly to the gym and after the workout the watch still had 97% battery. During exercise itself the Ultra 2 hardly consumes any battery, making it seem like it can compete with premium sports watches. However, you quickly realize that this is not the case when you use the watch in your daily life. I didn't track more training sessions this day, but I used various apps and widgets mainly for the purpose of shooting this video. I also tracked my sleep at night and the next morning, 24 hours after starting the day with a 100% charge, the watch had 64% battery remaining. This means it would roughly last for 3 days, which is better than the Series 9, about the same as last year's Ultra, but still significantly worse than dedicated sports watches. For example, in September I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania with the Garmin Fenix 7X Pro and the whole trek was 7 days. Something like that would definitely not be possible with the Ultra 2. So what can we conclude about the new Apple Watch Ultra 2? Well, it all depends on how you look at it. If you already have the Ultra One from last year, there's really no way that I would recommend you buying the Ultra 2. It's as simple as that. The main differences are that the display is now even brighter and the software is even faster. However, both things didn't really demand improvement and are only minimally noticeable at all. There's also the improved gesture control with double tap, CO2 neutral manufacturing and on-device Siri, although that's currently very limited. Other differences like the new cycling features are nice for sure, but are also coming to last year's version of the Ultra via watchOS 10 updates. So if you already have this watch, I wouldn't recommend buying the Ultra 2 now, but if you come from, let's say, an Apple Watch Series 4, 5, 6, or if you don't have a smartwatch or sports watch at all at the moment, of course the Ultra 2 is a very good choice. Just think of it as an improved Apple Watch Ultra and not like the Apple Watch Ultra 2. Because as such, the watch definitely has its merits. It's incredibly durable and high quality, has a ton of useful features and in my experience continues to provide the most accurate heart rate monitoring on the market. So it's definitely a very good watch. But personally, to be honest, I think it would also be a good idea to just wait until next year because as I said, it will be the 10th anniversary of the Apple Watch where we can hopefully expect some major updates like an improved battery life or some additional outdoor and navigation features. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the new Apple Watch Ultra 2 and if you found this video interesting or helpful, please consider hitting that like button. And if you don't want to miss any more videos in the future, you should also subscribe to this channel. But for now, thanks a lot for watching and see you next time.